Hello, everyone. This is Matt Haubrich of the Iowa DOT. I'm the chair of the AASHTO Subcommittee on Asset Management. I'm filling in today for Matt Hardy, the Program Director for Planning and Performance Management at AASHTO. To all of you that are joining us here on the line, welcome. We're excited to be back for the fourth and final episode of our webinar mini-series focusing on TAM tools. We started this series looking at the AASHTO portals and tools available there. And then in our second episode, we explored asset management systems. Last week, we looked at other TAM tools in use at transportation agencies, that is, tools other than management systems. And then for today's final meeting in the series, we will cover techniques used to apply TAM tools and advance TAM capabilities. We'll be resuming our regular bi-monthly TAM webinar schedule going forward. And Matt Hardy will be posting some details on the next set of webinars posted to the portal, at the TAM portal shortly, tam-portal.com. So if you want to register for that meeting or any of the other TAM webinars, or just catch up on any of the past webinars, you can do all of that at the AASHTO TAM portal, that is tam-portal.com, and click the events in the main menu there. You'll also find the video archive of previous webinars, including last week's webinar, on the AASHTO portals and related tools. Links to videos, slides from today's meeting will also be posted to the site. And of course, you'll also find many of the tools we've discussed earlier in this webinar mini-series right there on the TAM portal. And finally, if you do have any questions at all during today's webinar, please use the webinar's chat feature during the presentations. We'll have some time for open discussion toward the end of the session today. We're definitely looking forward to your questions, but until then, please be sure to keep your line muted. You are in control of the mute function, and so please be respectful of everyone else on the call and keep your line muted if you're not speaking. We do want to hear from you during the Q&A, but not before. So now I'm going to turn it over to Federal Highways TAM lead, Tasha Clemens, for a brief welcome on behalf of our co-sponsor, FHWA. Tasha could not join us in person today, but she has pre-recorded her welcome for us. So Perry will play her recorded video.
Hello, I'm Tasha Clemens with Federal Highway Administration, and I represent the Office of Infrastructure Asset Management Team. And I'm glad to be able to share this welcome with you on behalf of FHWA, a proud sponsor of this webinar mini-series along with AASHTO. And although a scheduling conflict means I'm not able to join you this afternoon, I think you're in for a great set of presentations today. And I'm looking forward to catching up on the video of today's webinar on the AASHTO TAM portal. In our third mini-series installment last week, we looked at some great TAM tools in use at transportation agencies, as well as some of the new and existing features of a web portal. For instance, FHWA's InfoBridge, which is available to all agencies. We heard how agencies are using these tools today and learned about plans to continue developing and enhancing these tools to advance TAM practices. And in our polling, we saw a lot of interest in GIS tools related to risk resiliency. This is a new area we will be sure to explore further on our future TAM webinars. In today's final installment of the mini-series, we're going to focus on techniques for making the most of TAM tools. We've got a top-notch slate of speakers lined up today. They will share with us how their agencies and organizations are establishing processes and practices to make effective use of TAM tools. I think you're really going to enjoy today's session. Finally, as this webinar series draws to a close, I just want to remind you that we'll be returning to our regular scheduled program of bi-monthly TAM webinars on the third Wednesday of the month. And I hope that you will all be able to join us in 2 months. Thank you for the chance to welcome you all today. And now I turn it back over to our webinar host to cover our agenda and objectives for today. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tasha. Glad that she could record that welcome for us today. So I'll quickly cover our objectives for the agenda today and then get us right into the presentations. Now, for the purpose of this installment of the TAM Tools webinar mini-series is three-part. First off, it's to raise awareness of the role of strong processes and practices in supporting effective use of asset management tools. Secondly, it's to understand some of the tools and associated processes in place today at transportation agencies, how and why they are being used. And finally, it's to hear from you. We're looking forward to some great questions and suggestions and a dialogue today as we round out this webinar mini-series. So specifically looking at the agenda, we'll start with a few Mentimeter polls to get everybody warmed up, and we'll have a series of brief presentations spotlighting the application of TAM tools. We are going to hear from Charles Lattimer of the University of Maryland's CATT Lab, Sage Donaldson from the Arizona DOT. Actually, these are in a little bit different order than my script here, but so let me read them on the order here. I actually am going to be presenting. I'm doing double duty today, so I have a quick presentation on TAM data information system investments. As I mentioned, Sage Donaldson from Arizona DOT, Joshua Lafond from New Hampshire DOT, and then Michael Johnson from Caltrans. Following the presentations, we'll have a Q&A session and a couple of closing polls. Please do submit your comments or questions ahead of time using the chat feature in the webinar control panel. You can do so at any time during today's presentations, and we'll read your questions and try to respond to them during the Q&A session. Also, the slides and video from today's webinar will be available shortly following the event conclusion at tam-portal.com. So let's get started with a few short polls. And so if you can go to menti.com and enter the code 38527187. Or you can click on, there's a poll link that was placed in the chat. You can click right on that and that'll take you to the same place. And for the first poll, we simply want to hear about how your agency is using TAM tools today. So which applications do you use management systems and other TAM tools to support? So the choices include TAMP development, collecting asset data for other assets, lifecycle planning for other assets, prioritizing investments, supporting target setting, analyzing needs for safety, mobility, et cetera, and any other. And of course, with other, we will definitely love to hear any particular others if you would like to either place those in the chat pod or share those verbally as we're kind of seeing some of the responses coming in. So seeing a number of folks who have kind of chimed in using the Menti poll. Not necessarily surprising to see TAMP development is one of the top applications. Although it's a little interesting that we have had 13 responses and only 11 have used it for TAMP development. So certainly not surprised to see target setting there, picking up some utilization, and of course collecting asset data for other assets. It is interesting that we see relatively towards the lower end of the scale with safety and mobility. I think speaking for our agency, those are represent two sort of separate functions in many ways from some of the mainline asset management that we do, and so it's not too surprising to me to sort of see that getting a little bit less support. Looks like the voting is starting to level out. Again, if you did answer other, it'd be great if you can provide a brief description maybe in the chat pod, but or I'm sorry, in the Menti here. I apologize. Since we only had one other on that, Perry, I think we can skip ahead to the next one. So for the last of our polls today, we'd like to learn about your priorities for new TAM tools that you'd like to see implemented at your agency. So this is a text question. We want to understand what tools would be most helpful to advancing TAM practice at your agency. So examples might include things like integration with travel demand models, maybe geospatial analysis across asset classes, improved asset simulation models, investment optimization models, or something else entirely. So, you know, please feel free to type any thoughts that you might have on other tools or techniques related to asset management that you would like to see developed or developed further. Again, you can go to menti.com and enter that code 38527187. Cross-asset analysis, cross-asset trade-off tool, okay. GIS integration with asset management systems, investment optimization models and tools, or models/tools. It's interesting to see this cross-asset idea continues to be one that we see interest in. It's something that we've put some resources into studying, and in terms of a couple of NCHRP projects, and I think that there continues to be kind of an interest in how we can approach the question of how do we make those optimal investments in our assets across asset classes. GIS collection with assets. Great, yeah. Maintenance models and asset integration. That's an interesting one, yeah. Integrating the practice of maintenance, it sounds like. Dashboard development for tips, comments, and public input. And trade-off analysis. I think those may be 3 ideas, actually. Give you another moment or two for any last ones that might kind of come in. But really appreciate input from everybody here. We've got close to 60 people on the call today, so want to give you some time to make any last comments that you might have to make. Please feel free to type those in. Again, these will all kind of be captured, and it's always good input for groups like AASHTO, Federal Highway, TRB, as we see some of these ideas coming up, to think about how can we support these activities. Are there things that we can do in the community to kind of help move things forward? And so really appreciate any comments or suggestions that you might have. It gives us ideas for, you know, things we can share about best practices in formats like this webinar, tools that maybe we can help to provide some input in terms of how folks are being successful in using some of these tools and processes. So appreciate all the input here. So I haven't seen anything come in lately, so let's jump on over to our first presentation. Our first speaker today is Charles Lattimer. Charles is with the University of Maryland Center for Advanced Transportation Technology, or the CATT Lab. Today he's going to be speaking to us about the TRB Standing Committee on Visualization and Transportation, or AED80, which Charles co-chairs. Okay, take it away, Charles.
All right, thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. Looks good.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, Matt, and thanks for the invitation to talk about how our committee can benefit those in the asset management community. So the overall goal of the Visualization and Transportation Committee is to use visualization to identify and address the critical issues of transportation today, and to develop innovative visualization approaches to meet society's transportation needs for the future. And we do this mostly through the work of our 3 subcommittees, which we'll talk about over the next few slides here. So our committee has 3 main areas of focus, each of which has its own subcommittee. And asset management has a home in really all 3 in different respects. So our first subcommittee is BIM for infrastructure, building information modeling for infrastructure. So a goal for many of us is a design and construction process that results in digital twins and digital as-builts that can be used and maintained for asset management purposes. The BIM for Infrastructure subcommittee helps to identify ways to guide and inform transportation agencies on how to implement this technology. Our second subcommittee is the subcommittee on performance visualization. And this is where data visualization and performance management come into play. When you think of performance visualization, many people's first thoughts go to travel times and travel time reliability. However, this is also a space where asset management can thrive as we consider ways to improve the visualization of asset condition data over time. And finally, our subcommittee on interactive visual simulation looks for ways to use immersive visualization to improve the process of learning and discovery. A good example of that is shown on the screen here, which is a project that was presented at our last visualization symposium. The project team here created a virtual reality experience that allowed users to experience how their coastal city would look under various scenarios of sea level rise. Similar techniques could be used to explore various transportation assets from a resiliency perspective, or to better understand hidden infrastructure like utilities. Our committee hosts several TRB webinars per year on various topics. Here's a listing of webinars in the past couple of years. If there be any topics that will be of interest to you and TAM in general, please let me know and we can add them to our list of future webinars for consideration. Our committee also produces a monthly visualization roundup, which is like a small e-newsletter featuring notable transportation visualization news articles from around the country. And please contact me if you'd like to be added to the list, or if you have an article that you'd like to see featured. Our committee has also been successful in advancing research needs statements through the NCHRP process. Our most recent project to be completed was a synthesis called Visualizing Highway Performance Measures, and it just wrapped up and is in the NCHRP publication review process. This past year, we submitted another research needs statement entitled A Guide for Creating Effective Visualizations, which is currently being evaluated for approval. So we get our fingers crossed there. Hopefully that'll be a good outcome. Speaking of our symposium here, if you want to see some of this technology in action and learn from leading practitioners in person, I highly recommend you to attend our next visualization symposium, which is going to be held in Washington, D.C. on November 3rd and 4th of this year. Our symposium will feature presentations on all 3 topic areas that we mentioned earlier, along with some cross-cutting topics on how visualization can address today's key transportation issues. We'll also feature keynote speakers and demonstration areas where participants can see hands-on demos of the latest technology. Here's a little QR code here. We'll keep this up here for a second here, but registration is now open, as are our call for presentation abstracts. So if you have a project or a topic you'd like to showcase, please use the following link to submit your abstract and register for the conference. Spread the word, and we look forward to seeing you there. So the our window for abstracts is currently open through the end of this month. So you still have some time to put those together if you're interested. Speaking of the symposium, there were a number of presentations from the last symposium that directly addressed asset management. So I wanted to share those with you along with a link to those. So the link on the screen here gives you access to all of the presentations from our previous symposium on all topics. But once you're in there, you can scroll down on the list, and there are 4 session titles above that you kind of see there. And those are kind of where a lot of the asset management presentations reside. So feel free to take a look at those at your leisure, and hopefully you can pick up some ideas that you can apply on the job. If you'd like to get involved, please consider becoming a friend of the committee. You'll receive our committee news and invitations to any upcoming meetings and events. So you just go to mytrb.org and you want to search for AED80, which is the code for our committee. And you can complete the self-nomination process to become a friend. If you have any questions or would like to get involved, you can feel free to reach out to me at the email address on the screen, lattimer@umd.edu. And I'd be happy to provide some more information and get you in touch with others who can help as well. And Matt is also a member of the committee too, and he'd be happy to answer some of your questions as well. So thank you, Matt, and we'll turn things back over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Charles. Yeah, yeah, as Charles mentioned, happy to help connect anyone to this this community as well. I think this idea of data visualization is a crucial one for asset management efforts and helping us to communicate and also the use of data to support asset management. So definitely a hot topic for us. Now I'll take a few minutes next to share a presentation on some of what we have going on at the Iowa DOT. I was asked to make this presentation before I was aware that I was going to be emceeing, so I'm kind of doing double duty today, but very happy to be able to share some work that we've had going on at Iowa DOT as actually part of a implementation project from an NCHRP project. And so I'll share some slides on that. Just give me a moment to get my transition here. Just lost Zoom. There we go. Share screen. Okay, hopefully you are seeing my slides now. So this was, as I mentioned, part of an NCHRP implementation project. The original project was NCHRP 08115, focused on TAM data and information systems. So some great data tools came out of that project, and I'll be talking about those a little bit here today. So first, I want to talk a little bit about the motivation for why we wanted to get involved in an implementation project for that original research done under NCHRP 08115. And that's really to kind of looking at how we program or how we prioritize and tier our assets. So we're looking for a systematic approach needed to align kind of our new and ongoing data collection, to look for enhancements to systems and tools, looking for at just the fact that we have limited data management resources, and trying to optimize those investments across our different program cycles. And really, I think that this is something I hear a lot of agencies struggling with, which is, we collect all this data, but what can we do with it? I mean, the phrase data rich, information poor is one I've been hearing for many years now. I think that still applies in many cases. And, so we wanted to be a little bit more strategic and thoughtful about the data that we're collecting and kind of go into the data collection process with the idea of how we're going to manage, maintain, and use that data. And really that comes down to how we want to manage those assets. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that. And really what this project was kind of getting at is connecting two kind of recently developed tools. The first is something that we saw that Minnesota DOT had invested in developing, and this is what we've been calling a framework for asset management. It kind of defines the approaches for asset management. So do we look at doing a full sort of approach of taking that asset and forecasting its future condition and really doing that condition-based assessment, and that's what's driving our decision making? Or is this an asset that we kind of look at it more on a cyclic basis? So we expect its life to be so many years, and at that point we kind of do a replacement. Or we have some assets that honestly is really we're really more on the page of just doing reactive maintenance. So doing things that when things break and need to be fixed. And there's a recognition that we can't probably really necessarily manage every asset at that condition forecasting level. There's just too many assets out there and not enough resources within our agency to be able to do that. And so what we have struggled against, though, is that there have been times when something comes up and the immediate reaction is, well, let's just go collect a bunch of data and then we'll figure out how to use it. And I think we're trying to be thinking a little bit more ahead about what is the framework under which we are going to use the data. And so kind of combining that MnDOT framework with the AASHTO TAM data guide that was developed under NCHRP 08115, that give that detailed practice capability benchmarks for kind of TAM data information systems. So that's really where we saw the opportunity to combine these two efforts. And so we have developed this framework and kind of thinking about it from these tiered management approaches, kind of what I mentioned before about that minimum maintenance approach versus kind of a cyclic maintenance or cyclical management approach versus a more of a life cycle condition-based management. And so we're looking at how we can link the data and what data needs are to those various approaches. So kind of starting with the approach, developing a series of kind of data models, thinking about what are the support capabilities, the needs that we really have there. And then that helps us focus on what are the data that we should be collecting to help support that effort, that management strategy. So it's trying to be a little more strategic and systematic about how we collect data, what data we're going to collect and manage, and where we put and how we decide to resource these efforts. So if we make the decision, hey, we really need to manage this asset at a high level, well, we need to really understand what that means in terms of the resource requirements that it's going to take to do that successfully. And so that's the other great thing about this framework, is it helps us think it's more than just collecting the data. We can't just go out, collect a bunch of data and consider the problem to be solved. We have to kind of think holistically about the whole strategy that we're going to use to manage that asset. And the data oftentimes is almost the cheapest part. It's all of the things you're going to do with that data and how you're going to use it, how you're going to manage it, that really need to be thought about up front before you start to go off and collect the data. So kind of applying the framework, we thought about it in this way. First we wanted to kind of identify that target asset, and we're hoping to be able to apply this to many different assets within the agency. We want to gather those step two is kind of gathering stakeholders, decision makers, pulling folks together, give a review. Step three is giving kind of a review of the general framework and kind of having that discussion. It's a little bit of a new way of thinking, honestly, for us. And so kind of reviewing this whole framework and talking about what it means and kind of getting people comfortable with the idea so that we can really have a thoughtful conversation about what strategy we want to have. And that's in step four, is really selecting the management approach and thinking about, what resources do we currently have? What resources would we need to have that approach be sustainable? And then at that point in step 5 and 6, we're really evaluating our data and our capabilities that we have to manage that asset within that desired approach. And then the seventh step is that assessment. We've gone through, we've thought about it, we've kind of started to put it into practice. Now, where are we in terms of our current versus desired state? What are some gaps? What are some opportunities? And where can we recommend some future actions to streamline our capabilities? So in terms of, this work is just kind of wrapped up in terms of the implementation project, kind of delivering this approach for us. And so now we're kind of putting it into practice. And so we're working within our asset management implementation team and our technical committee to try to identify and then prioritize and tier all of the different assets and features that we need to manage. Then using the products that were developed through this framework to identify a couple of assets that we can pilot, test, and really refine the framework and complete some assessments. And then, this will be something that we'll have available. So anytime the question gets asked, oh, well, how are we going to manage asset X? We can sort of have this framework in place to say, well, if you want to manage it this way, this is the resource requirements it's going to take. This is what you need to do. This is how the data will need to be, the basic idea of how the data need to be managed and maintained, if that's how you want to manage it. If you want to manage it at a condition-based assessment, then you're going to need a lot more information and data than if we're going to have more of a reactive type of approach. And so we can size the type of effort that we have to the needs of that particular asset or feature. So that's really, in a nutshell, what we have developed. I think it's a great opportunity to be able to leverage some of the funding that's available through NCHRP for implementation projects. I see, or earlier today, I saw that Peggy Knight was on the call here today. She was from Iowa DOT. She really led this effort, and I think did a great job in helping us kind of pull this framework together. And want to thank her, the whole team that worked on this, including our consultant partners from Spy Pond that helped develop this framework. And I'm happy to take any questions you might have as we get into the Q&A at the end. Thank you. All right, I'll stop sharing my screen then. Okay, Perry, I'm not finding my stop share button. I think I did something wrong.
Actually, it looks like the sharing has stopped. It may just be in full screen there.
All right, sorry about that.
No.
Let me get back to script. So next up, we have Sage Donaldson from Arizona DOT. Sage is the Data Analytics Section Manager and HPMS Program Manager at AZDOT, and she'll be presenting on Arizona DOT's Bridge and Pavement Dashboards. Take it away, Sage.
Yeah, hi.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Matt. So my name is Sage Donaldson. We've been working on a project here at Arizona DOT to come up with some really analytical, but also really informative dashboards to display HPMS information, these performance measure informations and performance planning information, as well as just information to be able to share with our local agencies. Because of the way that Arizona DOT is set up and the way that our road network works, we do need the ability to share a lot of information with our local public agencies outside of the DOT itself. So I'm going to go through a few dashboards here today, and I've kind of wanted to pull up a few others because one of the cool things that we've been able to do is create some interdependencies on some of these dashboards to allow for really enhanced performance measure planning and allow the data to kind of exist within each other. So this one here first is our structures dashboard. We're currently working to push this into a few other ways and start to enhance it for out-of-state use. So essentially, this is our NBI in our HPMS report for our structures. And so as I zoom in, the information changes on the screen. We can see the good, fair, poor metrics, as well as the total deck area and how many structures are in my zoom area here. We can also filter this by county, engineering district, our units, which are sometimes cities and otherwise, our council of governments and our metropolitan planning organizations, and the urban areas within the state. And so I can zoom in and kind of filter this how I need. And so if I pick a specific county, I can come in and see where there might be information for it. I unfortunately picked one with none. These are also symbolized by their good, fair, poor metrics. So you can see as you click on one, you can see the type and what it was rated, the deck area, and who owns it. We have a lot of circumstances where we have local owners on the national highway system, which means that we have structures that are not necessarily ADOT owned on the national highway system. And so that's been pretty important for project planning, not just within ADOT, but also within agencies around the state. Excuse me. The other thing I want to show here on top of this is our metadata dashboards. And so this has been a pretty unique thing and something that's been super helpful to us at ADOT, being able to explain our messaging to executive management and such. We have these embedded story maps that give a high level overview of the metadata that you need to understand in order to interpret the dashboards correctly. And so this just kind of goes through our reporting mechanisms. What are these different types of bridges that we have in Arizona, and what does it mean when they're rated good, fair, poor, or anything like that? Where are they typically seen? And then our actual bridge inventory data goes into a little bit of our reporting mechanisms, how we report them, why we report them a certain way, explaining how they sit on our data itself, so the cardinality of each of it. And just kind of goes into some more detail about how to understand what each of these components of the dashboard is. And so you can see here, we've got several in here for our different reports and our different federal information that we give to FHWA. And so this actually exists within a bunch of our dashboards. So as you're looking at all of this, you can get the needed information. So if you're looking at our HPMS dashboard, for instance, here's an overview of that HPMS specific information, so that when you're at our HPMS dashboard, which I'm showing here now, you can understand what we're getting at here. And so that's our structures dashboard. Also embedded in here is our extended travel reports. We have a few versions of this. We've got some tabular versions in here as well that allow you to use a pivot table to go through and understand a little more information and get into more of the granularity. So you can either look at this via the map on an ArcGIS online dashboard or in a tabular version. The next dashboard that I want to kind of show here, it's one that we're still piloting and one that we're still trying to figure out. The reason that it's kind of an obscure color is because we have a lot of people who are colorblind in our management levels here in Arizona. And so it's actually colored for colorblind. So, that's kind of why it looks a little different from the other one. But right now we have this populated with one specific route, which is the I-8 in Arizona. You can see, again, the good, fair, poor metrics, and you can also see how it's binned throughout as you travel down the road. So you can actually see the binning as well as the mileposts while you go down the road. You can also see the specific pavement type and where in the state it is. In this case, it's in Yuma, and also the pavement area. We can also see a general report of where the pavement is good, fair, and poor. And we can use this for project planning purposes to see where best would it be to put efforts into construction projects or into performance measure planning throughout the years. We can filter this however we want, so we can filter it down. We don't currently have any other years on this dashboard, but our plan is to have 5 years, so you can actually see how the pavement has changed in the last 5 years and actually do some level of growth analysis and some planning. You can also filter this by counties, by whether it's owned by ADOT, whether it's NHS, frontage road, ramps, cardinal direction, non-cardinal direction, and the route itself. We have populated in here some other routes, so you can switch it. So if we wanted to look at this piece of the I-10, we can also see where it's rated good, fair, poor in here, and where we can kind of put more effort towards it. Earlier, I talked about the synchronicity of the dashboards and how other pieces of data and information that we collect for Arizona and for HPMS purposes trickles into the performance measure planning with the structures and the pavement data. And a piece of that is our traffic data. And so what I'm showing here now is our traffic data throughout the state. It's visualized with what needs to be counted soonest, so what's deficient in counting, and what hasn't been counted in the allotment of time needed. And so that's visualized with the red, orange, and blue here. We can also filter this down however we'd like. We can see the next HPMS count cycle needed and when it needs to next be counted. So this allows us to sync our traffic data information via the ADTs with our pavement data and actually see the synchronicity of that data and how it relates to well-traveled pavement or well-traveled roads and the pavement decline or not. We also do share this with our local agencies throughout the state, so that they can do their own project planning and see where they are deficient on traffic, and kind of see where the trend of good or bad pavement or good or bad structures, or how they can align their own progress with ADOT's vision and ADOT's progress. So I think that's really it for what we've got here today. If anyone has any questions, I'm glad to take them at the end.
Oh, that was great. Thank you so much. Angie. Appreciate that. Yeah, and we will definitely be happy to take any questions you might have at the end. Please don't be shy about typing any questions you might have into the chat pod. I know following my comments, I got a couple of direct questions. Feel free to share those with the whole group, and all of us will be happy to answer those questions in the Q&A portion at the end of our time here together today. So, next up, I'd like to welcome Joshua Lafond from the New Hampshire DOT. Joshua will be presenting on their asset update tracking dashboard and some of the innovations they're pursuing in New Hampshire. So, Joshua, please take it away.
I think you should be able to see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So yeah, I'm going to talk quickly about this dashboard that we're implementing shortly, and then give a little quick demo after the few slides. Had the slides just in case the software didn't want to agree with me, but I think it's working properly today, so we'll be pretty good. So the purpose of this tool I'm going to show you is to track how and if the process of updating our assets is progressing through our construction projects. This particular dashboard is focusing on drainage and guardrail at the moment. There is possibilities as it matures that we could add more down the line. And we created an understanding that we wanted multiple bureaus within our department to be able to access this and get information and update accordingly. So a quick little overview is why was the need for this tool. And as I said, we're focusing on drainage and guardrail assets in particular, and we're currently in the process of data collection for our drainage assets here in New Hampshire. It includes, the location, the condition, material size, type, etc. And our guardrail assets, we've had, information, location and stuff like that, but hasn't really been updated often. I couldn't pinpoint how much in the past decade or so. So we felt grouping this into to try to get this up to date. This was a good time. The process would become necessary to update these assets, both of these kind of databases, so that they didn't become stale. And the more stale that they probably become, the less confidence we could have in the data, and we didn't want that moving forward. And again, we wanted multiple bureaus to be able to reference this tool in order to update their respective tasks. The dashboard itself also pulls information from multiple databases in our department, and organizes and displays them for the tracking process, which includes contract bid information such as the construction type or construction item type and the quantity of that particular item, as well as some project information, which includes location of the project, add dates, the project manager, and even some specific asset information, which is their unique asset ID, the type of the asset, and the condition, and etc. This next slide here is just it might be hard to read, so I apologize, but I've upped the text size and actually the dashboard, so you should be able to read it here in a second. But this is just a kind of like not the splash screen, but this is it in a nutshell. It's a couple tables and a map and with some filters. And I think in the next couple slides, I'm going to discuss these two tables here, and then I'll go a little bit more actually when I demo the dashboard itself. So the project asset status information table on the dashboard, it allows managers and supervisors to check on their project, the status of whether their design engineer or design team has updated the the asset information in our GIS database for, you know, the construction staff to use when they're as-building. You can see here it's got, you know, some basic information. It's contract number, the name, when it advertised, when the bids were opened. Even that actually calls out the project manager. But these two here on the right are probably the more important. They're the drainage status and guardrail status, and that's just telling the person who's reviewing the dashboard the status of the guardrail and drainage within the project limits. Has it been updated by the design team? If it has construction started as building it? If they have, is it complete? That kind of thing. This next one was the table right underneath that. It's the asset information itself, not specifically to the actual location and individual asset ID, but the project, what assets are going to be located on that. Through our data collection, we collected projects that had drainage and guardrail items, construction items on them, and anything that didn't have that was excluded from the dashboard database. So, and this just lets people, you know, be able to track the amount of material or amount of guardrail and drainage pipes, for example, for their project. And thinking progressing down the road, we could potentially even, you know, track how much guardrail was installed easily using this dashboard through downloading it directly from the dashboard. Now I'm going to go quickly over to the dashboard itself here. So as you can see here, again, like that screenshot I had in a few slides ago, we have this dashboard. And actually, I forgot to mention it, but one of the first slides had Tableau. We're using Tableau as a way to visualize our data on the dashboard. So we have, you know, our state map with our various projects here, kind of highlighting as I hover over them. The two tables that I mentioned or described through the slides themselves, and we have some filters over here and a couple actual buttons over here too. So a person reviewing their project come over here and just start looking through the filters, and if they click on these, you can see that it updates automatically the map. You couldn't really see it, but the tables update as well when we click on this next one for construction ready. This, you know, you can see the map changed, and even these tables here changed, and as built as well. It's still in its infancy, so we're still, you know, trying to get those kinks out to make sure more of these design ready projects will actually lead over to construction ready. And we do have previous years in here, so some of them have already been as built, and we need to kind of iron that out. You can also filter again by year here, and also the project manager if you wanted to. There's a drop down you could select as well. And I'm actually going to just want to look here as a demonstration for the years of 2021, 2022. And you can see the map already updated, eliminating most of those projects that didn't have any construction that included drainage or guardrail, and actually anything before these advertising years. And if I click on a specific project here, I could click on any part of this row. I want to go on the contract number here. It updates as well. The project limits are now displayed from our GIS information, and as well as the construction items that we're looking for. Granted, this is not all the construction items, but the drainage and guardrail items that we're particularly looking for are listed here. Just a way to confirm that, you know, this project has drainage and guardrail in it. And you can see the statuses here are showing some as-built. If there's NA, the dashboard knows and is visualizing to the table that there is no drainage work on that particular project, only guardrail. You know, some of these statewide guardrails here, statewide paving projects, resurfacing projects, not necessarily going to have drainage work, but would have guardrail work in them. And these are denoting that they have been as built by our construction administrators. And if you wanted to click over here to our second page of the dashboard, it looks very similar, but it's different information. This is more of the dive down specific assets within the project limits. And the filtering here again is we can go by project number, and I wrote it down so I didn't have to fumble that much. And as you can see here, we saw on the previous page that, you know, the drainage asset, actually I'll go back, so it is saying that it's pending, and then this proposed new, and that's saying that the reviewer, the guardrail has been updated and the drainage has not. And so the drainage is empty because the drainage for this particular project has not been put in. But the guardrail information is here. It's kind of truncated because I upped the font size here, but you can see if I hover over, these are all proposed new, who created them, the date, the specific IDs as well. If I clicked on this, they're not in here currently, but we know within the project limits. And for example, if some of these had been as-built by construction, they should be switch over from proposed new to as-built. And if there was like an existing in here, that would mean that the supervisor would probably go to their design staff and say, this particular ID does not have the appropriate status. Can you update it so it's ready for construction? And we actually did put a notes dashboard in here, kind of just goes with definitions. I know it went very quick, so if people were trying to follow what the definitions of the statuses were, they wouldn't be there, but this notes page would be available to anyone, so they could see the specific dashboard and any definitions that may be necessary. And again, this quick little demonstration based upon all the different data that we're pulling from different sources into this dashboard. And thank you. And if anyone has any questions, I'll be free to or happy to answer them at the end.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Joshua. I appreciate that. And last but not least, we have Mike Johnson joining us from California DOT or Caltrans. Mike will be presenting on some interesting aspects of Caltrans MPO coordination process related to asset management, performance projections, target setting, and more.
Good morning, everybody. Or I guess it's nearly afternoon here on the West Coast, so it's probably afternoon everywhere else in the country. My name is Mike Johnson. I'm the Caltrans State Asset Management Engineer. I'm going to use this opportunity to really cover 3 different tools that we use very briefly and sort of how we use them and for what purposes. The last one is specifically geared towards MPO coordination. The first 2 are more how we, the foundational data gathering that we do internal to Caltrans, and then a dashboard that we make available to the public. So I wanted to start with this one. This is a screenshot from an internal application that we use. And what this is a data definition of what our projects are doing. I'm not going to go through the whole dashboard, but you can see that a project, in this case, this is a bridge replacement project, but it's also doing a whole lot of other things. And we quantify those things in terms of what the condition of those assets are before a project and what the expected condition is after the project. And this is really important because it's this project level expected condition improvement that we use to assess our performance gaps to determine if we have enough projects in the pipeline to get us to the goals we're trying to achieve. So this is used internally just by Caltrans staff. It's a project level definition of what a project is accomplishing. And you can see there's things in here like, length of bike lanes being added and sidewalks and, what are we doing with respect to other complete streets components and safety components and signs and other things. So these are all things that are of interest to various folks within California. So from this project level, we capture this information. We do it for every project for the coming 10-year period. So that includes programmed work, work that's in formal planning, and work that's out still in the conceptual stage. We make all of this information available in a dashboard. This is available to anybody on this webinar by going to projectbook.dot.ca.gov. And what this is a window into all those projects. And so you can look for a major rehabilitation program. The public can come in, they can look at what Caltrans is planning to do for the next 10 years. Not only can they look at it, they can filter the data in a lot of different ways. And once they filter it the way they want it, you can see the sort of a tabular presentation of the data at the bottom. that information is all, they can download that into Excel file if they want to do something with the data. One of the things that's really popular with the public is the ability to isolate any one of these different activities that I showed you in the first screen. So for example, there's some 400 different activities that we're tracking within all of our projects. But if you were interested in, for example, just seeing which of the projects statewide includes bike boxes, for example, then you could uncheck all of these, check the bike boxes and hit enter, and it would just return those projects that are installing bike boxes. And then you could, once you've done that, you could download that if you wish. If you're looking geographically, you can, the map on the left is showing the whole state of California. You can zoom in to any scale that you want, but ultimately, geospatially, you're going to identify a project. So in this case, I've selected one project. Once you do that, the details of the selected project are shown in the window in the middle, which shows, when is this project supposed to happen? Where is it in the process? A description of the project. There's links to Google Maps for the vicinity and street view of the project, as well as links to our local district's project portal page, where there's typically pretty extensive project level information about each project. And then on the far right is just sort of a detailed map of the local project vicinity. And again, you can kind of zoom in on that map if you wish. So this dashboard is used by the public. It's a way for people that want to get engaged with our projects to find out what the department's doing in their neighborhood in the coming 10 years. And every project has a phone number and email addresses where the public can contact our local district to engage on a particular project. So this dashboard, again, it's public facing. It's intended to provide transparency of the projects that we're working on and what exactly the projects are doing, utilizing all of that internal project level detail that I showed you on the first application. So this dashboard is built in Tableau, and again, it's out. Anybody could go to it if you wish. The last tool I wanted to talk about is an Excel-based tool. And this is one that we've used for coordinating across all of our MPOs. California has more locally owned NHS than any state in the nation. We have 19 different MPOs. There's a lot of coordination that has to happen. And so we built this tool, and we could probably do a whole webinar on this tool alone, but the purpose of the tool is to help each MPO set appropriate targets for the TAMP. And so in general, this Excel spreadsheet starts with the available funding. So how much funding does each agency have? How does it stratify over the 5 federal work types? There is an opportunity to indicate, in this case, how much of your available budget you're spending on risk mitigation. And then that's kind of summarized on the right there, and how much is being spent in these different areas. Then with the budget, we utilize the existing inventory and built-in deterioration models and cost models within this spreadsheet to estimate where that agency will be in terms of their conditions at the end of a 10-year period. So that's sort of those orange columns, invested 10-year end. So if the agency invests the dollar levels that are shown above, we expect them to get the orange results. We also do a calculation for a 4-year result to help us with our TPM target setting. And then the far column there is showing them what is their existing target that they've established, and how does this analysis align with that target. If the condition for the level of investment is projected to be worse than their targets, then we'll do a gap analysis here, and it'll quantify in terms of, in this case, this is lane miles for a small agency. They've got about 250 lane miles of NHS in their jurisdiction. But at the current levels of investment, we're predicting that they're gonna be deficient by about 9 lane miles at the end of the 10-year period. If they want to close that gap, we estimate that to be about $11 million. So we're sort of giving them the tools to say, okay, this is what I think I'm investing. And then we say, okay, if you invest that, we think you're going to come up short by about 9 lane miles or $11 million. So maybe you want to think about, readjusting your available finances, or think about readjusting your target. This is important because in California, we let each MPO set their own targets for both pavement and bridge. And then at the state level in the California TAMP, we roll all those up and weight them relative to the amount of the statewide inventory that each one of these MPOs has and how much Caltrans has. So this tool has a lot of capabilities to change things. So anything that's green can be overridden, and the agency, for example, we give them a default budget that comes straight from our state controller's office. But if they don't believe that budget is accurate, they can override that and put it in the green area. They can, in effect, communicate to us how much of your budget are they anticipating spending on risk mitigation? And in many cases, it's zero. And so, we are developing a risk-based asset management plan. So it's important for us to provide the opportunity for them to show that there's an investment going to risk mitigation or there isn't. And so the feedback that we've got on this particular tool, it's Excel based. We developed it, we provide it free to all the MPOs in California. We load it with their inventory data because we collect all the NHS bridge conditions and the NHS pavement conditions. So those, you'll notice they're all white. We don't allow them to change them because they're really not something we want them playing with. Those are the current conditions of those assets. We preload it with historic budget levels broken out in the 5 work types. And then behind the scenes of this, there's deterioration rates and things that they can also adjust if they don't believe or like the statewide deterioration rates, they can make adjustments. So we've had a lot of agencies using this tool. In fact, we required every MPO to submit it and to sign off saying, okay, this is the this MPO's answer. And we do this for both pavements and bridges. We're looking at actually expanding this tool to be something that we would use that's, instead of driven off of a budget, would be driven off of project in a regional transportation plan. So we're working on that right now, but in a sense, it does the same gap analysis. It just, in the latest work we're doing, it's sort of further down in the process, maybe before there's approval of a regional transportation plan. You can look across the project portfolio and say, is this enough to make progress towards these TPM goals? Yes or no? And so we're hoping that by providing these tools, we're giving our partners a resource that they otherwise don't have. And in fact, many cities and counties, we have about 650 cities and counties in total in California that have a part of the NHS. And many of them have requested this worksheet to actually do their asset management with, and particularly for small agencies that can't afford a management system, they want to be able to put their entire inventory in here out, beyond the NHS, so that they can do these kinds of analysis. And the feedback we're getting is that it's helping them have conversations with their local boards about what is achievable given a budget, or conversely, they can change the budget iteratively and figure out how much money is required to achieve a certain performance target. So anyway, those are 3 quick tools that we're using in Caltrans. We have many dashboards that we developed and published, some internal, some external. And we find these tools really, help supplement what Caltrans is trying to do with respect to asset management. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Matt.
Wow, thank you so much, Mike. Great stuff. Really appreciate you sharing some of those tools. It's fantastic to see what you have and what everything that was presented on today's webinar. I really want to thank all the presenters today for sharing everything that you've shared. And now it's really time for us to get input from the community. So for the 50+ people who are nearly 60 people who are on today's call, we'd like to ask you to share your questions using the webinar chat function. And for those that you have submitted your questions, we can call on you to unmute your line and ask your question verbally. And we're going to go ahead and open some things up for Q&A and discussion. And by the way, it doesn't have to be strictly a question. If anyone has a comment or something to add to anything that you saw today, or anything that is on your mind related to this topic, please feel free to take this opportunity to share. And we'll look forward to that great discussion. I did see that there were a couple of questions that got posted into the chat. And so let's kind of jump in to the Q&A, but I want to start with, yeah, by the way, yes, all the presenters, if you wouldn't mind coming back to camera, and that way we're all ready to respond to any questions that might kind of come in. So I saw a couple of questions in the chat. It looked like one for Joshua about how the data are updated. Looks like you did type a response back to that, Joshua. Is there anything else you wanted to kind of say about that process in terms of how the tool is actually used by your various stakeholders?
Yeah, and I think hopefully I answered Sharon's question. But so the tool, I think, is kind of twofold right now. It's, we haven't really published it yet. We're almost to that point, so we haven't had the opportunity to get feedback from everybody. But I did meet with some, key personnel that had some inputs on it and made improvements since then. But if you remember, the dashboard had previous years in it, and one of the, I think, goals for this summer is to get some summer interns to help update some of the guardrail on the older projects. Something that would be able to use that. So, our survey team would be able to use the dashboard in addition to us tracking future projects, but able to go back and make sure some of the older projects are actually reflecting the correct end units for example, and stuff like that. So.
Okay, great, very helpful. Yeah, appreciate that. There was another question that came in. Actually, it was a direct message to me, so it didn't show up in the everyone chat, but I'll just mention it briefly. The question came in about the presentation that I made on the data framework and whether it was applicable kind of globally or it was more asset specific. And I guess what my answer to that is that it is designed to ultimately result in an asset specific sort of solution or approach for what our data needs are. But it's designed to be kind of an overarching framework for making those kinds of decisions. So in other words, we are trying to be consistent in how we're making decisions about what data we need and how we want to manage and maintain that data based on the specific strategy that we've selected for a particular asset. So, one example, in fact, there is a kind of a hypothetical example that's included in the expanded slide deck, that if you download the slides from the TAM portal, tam-portal.com, following the webinar here, you'll be able to see those additional slides, kind of laying out a hypothetical example related to guardrail, and sort of about, let's say that we pick a strategy for guardrail, that we're going to just sort of do reactive maintenance on guardrail when it's damaged or needs repair. We repair it. Otherwise, we don't really have a systematic or condition-based strategy for guardrail. And so the example kind of walks through all of the framework and the different decisions that we would make in terms of, how we would resource the data collection, what type of data is needed. In that case, we would need an inventory, but probably not much else. And kind of walks through all of those different parts of the framework and how the framework helps us to guide the decisions about what data and information we need, and the resource needs that are needed to manage that asset at that particular level. And we have not done that work yet to decide exactly how Iowa DOT wants to manage guardrail, for example. So that is a hypothetical example at this point in time, but the framework was going to help us with the conversation once we make that decision about how we intend to manage guardrail. So I hope that helps a little bit. I know it's a little, I would say a little theoretical right now, but it's, I think, a nice kind of extension of that original research, kind of looking at TAM data needs and then taking it into, okay, so once we've kind of thought about how we want to manage our assets, how do we get more specific about the actual alignment of our data with the strategy that we have to manage the asset? Because we're not managing data for the sake of data. We're managing data to support the management of an asset or class of assets. Okay, I hope that helps a little bit. I'm not seeing a lot of other questions kind of popping into the chat. Let's see. Mike, one question I had for you is I was kind of seeing your the second product that you shared there, the public-facing dashboard on projects. I guess I kind of have two questions about that. One, I'm a little curious if you have any idea of kind of how frequently that's being used, and if any information about the type of users. And also, I'm sort of curious if I noticed it was kind of branded with that your shop program, and I was curious if you're including all projects or if it's just kind of a subset of the types of projects that Caltrans does that are included in that dashboard.
Yeah, both good questions, Matt. Yeah, so it is, the SHOP acronym is our State Highway Operation Protection Program. So this is our primary rehabilitation and replacement program. So it's about a $5 billion annual program. We could produce similar dashboards for our maintenance program as well. And we have what we call minor programs too, which are just smaller dollar value projects. We're doing the same project level data collection for all of them. In other words, what we're really focused on is collectively, what are all of our projects doing, and how does that compare to what we have to do to close the gap to get to the goals we're after? So I often say, asset management doesn't really care who pays. What we care about is that it gets done, right? So it could come out of this program or another. I just, the dashboard that I showed you is the one that's most frequently used. We do some data analytics on it from time to time. At certain times, like generally after we have commission presentations, then the numbers will blow up. We might get 150 hits, but day to day, it generally runs around 20 to 30 on a just, no news kind of day. There are people that are routinely going to that. As far as where, who's accessing it, I don't know that I have that information, because I do think that, different Caltrans units and our executives use that dashboard too, to just, you know, if they get a phone call and they need to answer something, they can go in real quickly and just see everything that we've, you know, got programmed or that we plan to do, you know, in the next 10 years, and to be able to answer some questions real quickly.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it kind of reminds me a little bit. We had of a scenario in Iowa where we had put together a winter operations dashboard that was supposed to be public facing, you know, it was public facing, but as we did the analysis on the hits, we noticed that like over 99% of the hits were from internal like IP addresses. So they were coming from people in the DOT who were hitting that public resource and using that probably for the reasons you mentioned to answer stakeholder questions and that kind of thing. So interesting. Okay, well, I think, you know, that internal communication is something that in my view, we often neglect, and we have a lot of stakeholders internally that aren't always in the loop on projects and what's going on in there, but yet they might need to know something. And so having those kind of tools available, even if they're primarily an internal, you know, end up being sort of more internal, they're the type of public information that anyone can know, and it can be very valuable for anyone to have access to that.
Yeah, it's pretty dynamic data in a sense. Every Transportation Commission meeting, there are projects that go in for schedule changes or cost changes. And because that 10-year set of work is all fiscally constrained, sometimes it pushes things around. And, you know, some of the lower priority things may drop off if there are cost increases on some of the higher priority projects. And so being transparent is good, you know, and sometimes you have to explain the decision making. You know, why did we do this to this, you know, project that I was interested in? Maybe it got delayed by a year. So why did that happen? Or, you know, why didn't you do something on a particular project? So it's been a pretty good tool to get more public engagement, and it's pretty well received by a lot of advocacy groups that want to look at specific aspects of our projects, like you know, how many of our projects have complete streets elements in there, for example. So that's one of the things that you could filter on and, you know, get a count. And if you want to look at the specifics of what exactly we're doing, you know, you could download all of that into Excel and, you know, do the kinds of analysis that people want to do. So, you know, you've got to be confident in your project selection, and you've got to be confident in your data if you're going to put it out there for public consumption.
That's a great point, and probably something that holds a few folks back. So thanks for sharing that. I actually do see the one more question kind of popped into the chat here for you, Mike, not to overload you with the questions, but the question about the Excel tool, asking about if it's based on a set of unit costs in the background. I think that's the MPO tool. And if yes, how are the unit costs updated in that tool?
Yeah, it's a great question. It is based, you know, it is unit cost based. So, you know, we obviously don't know what the MPOs are specifically proposing for any one project solution. You know, we're basing our unit costs based on a range of treatments for pavement and for bridges that are typical in California. Pavement costs our pavement costs are updated annually, and bridge costs are reviewed annually. I wouldn't say they're always updated annually, because they seem to be less sensitive to you know, like right now the asphalt prices are going up, so the pavement costs are very sensitive to that. Bridge is a square foot cost that we apply to the size of the inventory that they need to move from one condition to another. And it is also subject to obviously material and labor costs, but seems to be a little less sensitive. So we look at bridge, it probably gets updated maybe every other year practically. But pavement, you know, probably 20 different treatments are updated annually.
Okay, great, thank you. Sage, I was a little curious in your presentation, you shared of talking a bit about HPMS, and I think one kind of disconnect that I hear with a lot of agencies is between their pavement management systems and their HPMS systems. And I was a little bit interested to see that you had some pavement condition data and so forth in there. And I'm just wondering if you can comment at all about, kind of how Arizona DOT is kind of looking at the results from HPMS and kind of considering that, or if there is a link there with your pavement management system and that how you're thinking about pavements that you are looking to do work with.
Yeah, for sure. So we've actually been working pretty hard on trying to bridge that gap between our pavement management group and our GIS and HPMS teams. The first piece of that is actually getting them to input and collect their data into our GIS systems, which kind of helps us in just kind of realigning that data so that when we're submitting HPMS, we're looking at the same data that the pavement management system team is looking at. And so that's one way we've been able to kind of bridge that. Another piece that we do is our teams work together when we actually collect the data, the vans going out and actually collecting the pavement data. We ingest that data in two different ways. First being geospatial. So we take that routing file, we take that binning, that 10th of a mile binning that's done for HPMS and actually translate it into our pavement data as well. And so we kind of use the HPMS standards as our linkage between our teams. And so when we talk about our pavement data and we talk about putting it into the good, fair, and poor metrics and mileage, it's the same way that we report it to HPMS. And it was kind of a tough transition initially, but adapting to what the agency needs in order to look at pavement data and also aligning that with our HPMS needs has been really helpful so that we are talking about the same data and using the same validation methods.
Oh, great. Very helpful. Thank you. Well, I see we're getting kind of close to the end of our time here. I think we do have one more kind of closing poll. So unless there's any other questions, and by the way, for the panel, you are free to ask questions of one another as well if you have any. You've noticed me asking a few questions, and I don't be shy if there are any final questions. But I think we should look to pivot towards the final Menti poll that we have today. Please go back to your menti.com and go to the code 15025903. And I think Perry will put that in the, or so Perry or Abby will stick that in the chat here for us as well. But we want to really kind of close out today by hearing what you found to be valuable about today's webinar. This is the last in the series, so feel free to comment on either today's webinar specifically, or if you have anything about the series overall on TAM tools. It's a labor of love to put these together and to help support the asset management community. And we've had, over this mini series, a tremendous amount of fantastic information shared. Really want to thank very much not only the speakers today, but across all of the webinar series and across the webinars in general. We've been doing this webinar series since 2012, and with the mini series that we've had, I think we've had over 60 webinars that have been delivered in that 10-year time frame, and it's definitely something that we hope is providing a lot of value to our community. It's why we continue to do it, and we love to hear from those of you that are on the in the audience about what we can continue to do to make this valuable to you, and to help help make your work easier, or to find opportunities to learn from some of the things that you are doing and share those. So please, love to see the comments as they're coming in here. The dashboards looks like definitely a lot of positive response to those dashboard ideas. The Caltrans spreadsheet, the Arizona dashboards, New Hampshire tool, hearing about what's challenging, what works, hearing from the DOTs, yep. So really appreciate all of your thoughts on what was valuable. And we'll continue to collect these. I do want to go to the last question, as we just have just a couple minutes left today. So Perry, if you can, we'll continue to get those, but if you can also indicate any topics that you might want to hear us explore further in future webinars. And this is very valuable input to us. So please, put your thinking caps on anything that would be valuable to you, reflecting on today or any of the parts of the series that you've had the opportunity to participate in. We would love to get your input on anything and everything that would be useful to you in the audience. And that includes the panelists. So for those of you in the panel, if you have any ideas on additional topics, please don't be shy about sticking those into the Menti poll here. And there is a link to the Menti poll in the chat, but again, you can go to menti.com. 15025903 is the code. It's just up there in the, if you're looking at the webinar, it's towards the top of the page. So seeing some things here: dashboards, coordination with MPOs, coordination of data visualization tools, using GIS dashboards, dashboard use of GIS, so a couple of GIS dashboard related. I think we saw a couple great examples of that today. Caltrans project dashboard, all the platforms used to pull the data and verify the data. Some of the difficulties with data, how DOTs have addressed it. So yeah, having data is one thing, having quality data is something else. Certainly, many of us have had experiences, some of them pretty nightmarish, of starting to work on something and realizing the data you have is not relevant or not good. Little garbage in, garbage out issue. Data visualization products that are used, yeah, definitely something I do want to take a moment and kind of plug here, as I'm seeing a number of comments about dashboards, data visualization products, and so forth. Reflect back on Charles's presentation up at the top of the session here. I think Charles had to leave, but I do want to mention or kind of plug for the the TRV Visualization Committee, and of course we have multiple groups, subgroups there that he talked about, but we have the Visualization Symposium coming up in early November, and there's an opportunity to see a lot of the kinds of things that are being mentioned here. And of course, if you're not able to attend that in person, this is definitely great fodder for our webinar series to look for opportunities to share some of these types of products and tools with the audience for this webinar. So with that, I think we are at the end of our time. And so again, I want to thank everyone for participating. Again, tam-portal.com/events is a great way to get signed up for this webinar series. Our next webinar will be, it's labeled Webinar 58. As I mentioned, we have had these mini series, so we've actually done over 60 of these, but it'll be in July of 2022. Topic will be announced shortly, but keep an eye out for that. We try to do these on the third Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So thank you again, everyone, for being part of the session today. Thanks for all of you for sharing your ideas, your thoughts, and we'll be back in 2 months. Please continue to share any ideas you might have. You can put those in the Menti poll or email those to me or Matt Hardy. We'll be happy to accept those. Thank you again to the speakers. And just last reminder, you can always find recordings and of these slide decks. Many of the products that we've talked about today are available from the AASHTO TAM portal. That's tam-portal.com. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.